So thank you both for joining us today. There's an ongoing debate that's been around for a long time about the health effects of using mobile phones. What can you guys tell us about the latest research?
So this year, the National Toxicology Programme in the States, which is known for researching carcinogenicity or cancer-causing ability of various toxic agents, and with gold standard methodology that's globally respected, that did a very large, the largest of its kind, study looking at radiofrequency radiation from mobile phones and the effects on rats. And unfortunately, that study concluded that there was clear evidence of carcinogenicity, or that RF from cell phones was causing cancer. The type of tumours they found were glial cell tumours and schwannomas, which are the two cell types that we've also seen in humans who are heavy users of cell phones after many years. But this was closely followed up by another study from the Ramazzini Institute in Italy, and they looked at much lower intensity radiation from mobile phone base stations. And what they found was, again, these same types of cancers. So really the link, you're right, it's sort of gone up and down in the media over many years, and there's obviously a huge amount of political pressure against that being common knowledge. But really it's that the causal links with cancer have been very well consolidated this year, and it's something we have to face and take seriously and behave responsibly in terms of lowering public exposure.
Right, so you mentioned cancer, which is obviously a very scary proposition. Are there any other health risks? And also, you guys have done a lot of research. I'm just concerned that we, as the public, don't get warned enough about this. So could you tell us a bit more about that as well?
Well, going back to your first point in terms of other health concerns, cancer, many would say, is just the tip of the iceberg, really, because this type of radiation exposure causes something called oxidative stress, which is a degenerative process in cells that can lead to many different endpoints, and cancer is just one of them, but it's implicated in ADHD and autism in children, and dementias in the elderly, infertility, many different disease processes targeting many different organs, which is kind of what you would expect from radiation because it's absorbed in all different areas of the body. And in terms of why the public hasn't perhaps been brilliantly warned, I'll put that over to my colleague Brian, but I mentioned some of the political inertia on this subject, and I think he'll expand on that in a bit more detail.
Well, I think you have to remember that the UK has, for many, many years, and many different governments announced that they would be the world leader in wireless technology. And the problem is with that is that once you're hooked on that, it's very, very difficult then to start arguing that it's causing cancer. So the government and the Health Protection Agency have been very, very reluctant to bring to the public's attention this research that we're seeing. And the truth is you have to follow the money. The government is just about to sell the 5G licences for probably 12-15 billion pounds, and if they don't get that revenues in, then they will have a serious shortfall in monies for funding the government. So they're quite reluctant to warn people. You've also got the situation in the UK that our newspapers now take half their revenue, half their advertising revenue from the mobile phone industry. So the newspapers have quite a conflict of interest in telling people that this is causing a major problem when they might actually be upsetting the people that keep them in business. So it's a very, very complicated area, and we mustn't forget that we have history in this area, whether it was cigarettes and cancer and whether it was asbestos and cancer. Our Health Protection Agency have a history of trying to hide the truth because of money and the economy rather than telling us the truth. And we think that now the time has come where people need to start telling the truth, because what we're now seeing is longevity in the UK going backwards because of rises in cancer and other illnesses. And the research is showing it's causing cancer and these other illnesses of why we're seeing people dying younger. We need to take some action.
Yeah. So, obviously, the younger you get, probably at the moment, the more you use your phone. That's a bit of a sweeping generalisation, but still, Is the risk for the same for every, age, gender, demographic, whatever? And what can we do to protect ourselves?
There's very substantial variation between different people in their response to radiation. Children, we certainly know, are more vulnerable. They're physically smaller, but they have thinner skulls and developing organs, particularly their reproductive system, for example, and their immune system. And they have a lot of what we call stem cells, which are exquisitely sensitive to this kind of radiation. Of course, because their exposures have started much younger than the generations before them, they've also got a longer time ahead of them for the latent effects. So we're seeing this unfolding very similarly to things like tobacco and asbestos, where there's a latent period, and it might be decades before the exposure produces the cancer. Now, if a child was exposed, and in these days usually in utero during pregnancy, then obviously that latent period still hits them in the prime of their life. So that's a very serious problem. And really, I think the argument for particularly protecting children in schools from things like Wi-Fi right now is black and white. I don't think there can be any sensible argument against doing that. And indeed, proactive nations like France have banned Wi-Fi in nurseries. They're limiting it for under sixes, and many other countries are now following suit. We're one of the most relaxed on the planet in terms of our unsafe limits, and I think starting with schools is a great and important place. There are many other vulnerable groups, though, such as the elderly and people who have high occupational exposure, people with metal work in their bodies, and a new condition called electromagnetic hypersensitivity, where some people are getting headaches, insomnia, palpitations, sleep disturbance and things like that very quickly after exposure.
Oh, and we should remember, in terms of the politics of this, over 10 years ago there was a panorama programme, and a scientist announced that we should not be putting Wi-Fi in schools. This is over 10 years ago, because it was too dangerous, it was too risky. And sadly, the government and the media pounced on this the following day, and it was ridiculed enormously. And so much so that the individual concerned, who was Sir William Stewart, the head of the Health Protection Agency that saw all the research that was warning us not to put Wi-Fi in schools, was removed from office. So you understand the politics of why the government and how the government is able to influence what the public actually know and understand. And they should start looking at now the research themselves, because they need to start informing themselves of what's going on. But as Erica said, other countries now are taking action themselves, whereas we are putting our masts up in schools and on hospitals, which is actually affecting the vulnerable groups. And those individuals, the health protection agencies, should know they need to protect the vulnerable groups.
Thank you, guys. Where can our listeners go to find more information?
I think that you need to go to the Radiation Research Trust website, the FIRE website, which helps doctors to understand this, and also the Environmental Health Trust website, which is very, very professional, tells you all the research and what you can do about it.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.